Hi everybody, in this video I want to show you how to change the names of your cell references. So I'm on the main 5.1 workbook that we've been doing some editing to, and I'm in the terms and definitions sheet. So we have some different percentages here, and if I just click the first one that says 30%, you see of course in the top left the cell reference is C5, right? Which makes perfect sense. Now, sometimes it's helpful to change the name of the cell. Particularly if you're trying to share your workbook with somebody else or have a presentation or something like that. It may be very difficult for people to follow along on a workbook where formulas are using cell references, particularly if they're not as familiar with Excel or if they're not familiar with the information that you're presenting. So it may be more helpful sometimes to have actual words instead of cell references like C5 or C6, for instance. So there's different ways that you can do that. If you're just changing a few of the names, you can do it manually. So I'm selecting cell C5, and I'm going to let the title of it be COGS percent instead. So COGS. So on the name box here, I'm just going to click it, and I'm literally going to type into it. The only thing here, though, is you cannot use spaces. So there's certain characters that you cannot use. So if you get error messages, that's why. But I can use an underscore. So typically underscore is used for a space. So I'm just going to type it in as COGS percent. And when I'm done, I'm just going to hit enter. And now if you look, if I click on cell C6, it says C6. But if I click on cell C5, it now says COGS percent. So it's still using C5 in the background, but it has a new name now. So if somebody is clicking through, they can see what it represents. Now, if you have to do this a lot, it's actually much easier to create a column to name them. So on the left here, I would like to have all of these cell references changed to these names here. So there's a shortcut way that we can do that. If, again, that information is already in Excel, typically in a column to the left or right of it. So what I'm going to do in that case is I'm going to select cells B5 through C10 instead. So notice that I have the title that I would like them to be called and then the actual cells. And I'm going to go up here to formulas. And sorry, I just have to move my Zoom stuff around. And under formulas in the middle here, you see create from selection. And I'm going to go ahead and click that one. And it will do the whole group for me. And it wants to know, well, where are the names? So here our names are in the left column. They could be in a right column. You could do in the top row or bottom row if you were doing the data more horizontally. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And once I do that, I'm going to go check. And now I can see that all the way down, all of those names have been changed. So it's kind of interesting because what I can do here, so let's say I wanted to add the first 2% together for whatever reason. I could start my formula and hit my sum formula. And then I can select these two and hit enter. Oops, let's see, let's try this again. And you can see a few different things are going to happen. If I select a whole range of things, let's just add them all up. They are using those cell references there, which we can fix as well, but they are still using the cell references when you add. Excel knows how to deal with them and things like that. If you're doing it more manually, you can select the cells and you can see that they can use the name there too. So you can have it displayed in different ways within Excel here. Do I want to replace it? Sure. Oh, now I just deleted my data. But we can do it in different ways here as well. So I'm going to do some more work with that and show you how that can be helpful. All right. So let's do a few things here. All right. So I'm going to follow along with our text. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to group some of my sheets together. So I'm going to go from sheet 1 here all the way to sheet 8. So I'm using that shift key to group everything together. Okay. And then I'm going to go to cell. Let's see, it wants me to use cell D12. So D12 would be right here. And what you can do, because we've named it now, is you can actually just hit equals and also start typing in the name. So notice how when I start typing in the name of that first cell, that COGS percent, it actually comes up as my function list here, which is pretty cool. So I can go ahead and use that. Maybe I just want to bring that 1% in here and click enter. So we're bringing that percentage in from that other sheet here, and we're seeing it represented as COGS percent. So those names will start to show as kind of like function notation there, or formula notation. One thing I will point out too is when you're naming things, it will not let you use formulas that are already used in Excel. For instance, like I can't call this an average because Excel already uses average for something else. So it does have to have a unique name. And again, there's certain characters that you cannot use, like a space, for instance. So you have to, read through your text to see all the little details there. But if you're getting an error message, it could be that you're just using a character that you shouldn't be, or you're using a name that's already in place. So they do have to be unique names. They can be long, but it does help to keep these short, right? Really long names are difficult to kind of read. So we want to really use them for short references. And again, when it's helpful, particularly when we're trying to present to somebody else or share our data with somebody else that wouldn't understand what all the cell references are as easily as we would, right? So that's kind of one thing that you can do there. And you can start to use those names in the formula. And we can do those for others too. So I won't do all of them. But your book suggests that in D18, we do the payroll percent there. So again, if I know the names, I can start typing it in. And if it's already been named, I can just use payroll percent. And again, it will transfer it right in as well. So that's a nice little feature here. All right, so let's do a little bit more work here. I'm going to go back to, let's see, cell 5-1, okay, which I'm already on. I'm going to select cells A7 to B7 here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the Formulas tab. And I'm going to do Create from Selection again. And I'm going to use the left column as my name. And then now you'll notice that, again, I've renamed cell B7 as total sales. So you can see it right there, total sales. So again, I kind of already have my labels here, and I was able to, again, create from selection. So you can still see the formula there, right? It's still a sum formula, but the name of it is now total sales. So this is just helpful as we go through here. On the other sheets, you're seeing the same thing, right? Because they were grouped. So notice that for B7 here, it's also being named total sales. On the third sheet, again, B7 was also renamed to total sales. So if you have group sheets and you want to rename a cell, you can do that as well throughout the whole workbook. And it will do the same change on each sheet, right? Because they're all. All right, so now one thing I want to show is, well, how do you know which cells have names now, right? So it's we've kind of gone through and changed a lot of things. So if you go into your formulas feature here and you see the name manager, you can click that and you can see all the cells that we have renamed, what their names are, what the values of the cell, because that helps you to kind of see what piece of information you're looking at, where it's referring to, right? So like, what is the actual cell, right? So it's on this sheet, this cell, this sheet, this cell, etc. And then the last piece here is what I want to talk about, and this is the scope. So the words or the names, COGS percent, controllable profit percent, occupancy percent, etc., are valid throughout the entire workbook. So because those are unique names and they don't appear anywhere else on other worksheets, you can use those names throughout the whole workbook, and that same cell reference will be used wherever you need to. Notice here that we have multiple things named total sales, right? Because we grouped those sheets and we have 8 sheets there, and they each have sales category depending on the region. So we actually have 8 different things called total sales. And you'll notice that the scope has changed. So for instance, this one here which is B7 on sheet 2, is only valid on sheet 2. So if you use the total sales name on sheet 2, it will use the B7 value from sheet 2. Here, if you use the total sales name on sheet 3, it will only be valid on sheet 3. So because that word total sales is used on multiple sheets, it's only valid on the sheet that you're using it on, right? It's not going to bring in total sales from a different sheet. It's going to keep it within the same sheet because that name is being used over and over again. There is one thing I want to change here, though. Notice how the total sales name from sheet 1, which was our active sheet, is valid on the whole workbook. I don't really want that, right? Because they're different regions. I don't want to mix up which total sales is which sales. So I am going to change this one. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this one. I do not want it to be valid on the entire workbook. And then I'm going to go ahead and click new and basically put it back in. So I'm going to do total, I think we're using all capitals, right? Total sales. I want the scope to only be for the first worksheet here. And you'll notice that I do need to update this little piece here. So I want to refer to the first worksheet for cell B7 there. So I want to make sure that I have the right reference cell and that I'm keeping the scope to just that sheet, and then I can hit OK. And you see that was added in there. So now that one is correctly categorized as well, where the word total sale is valid on the individual sheets that we're in. Okay, and that scope idea is helpful so that, you know, if you're using these names, again, if the name is only used once in the entire workbook, then it's going to pretty much be used throughout the workbook and it's fine. But if you're using the same name on multiple sheets, you want to make sure that it stays within that sheet for that reference. All right, a couple more things here. You can also use those names in the formula, which I kind of started to show you, right? Sometimes we use cell references, sometimes we're going to use names there. So let me go do a little bit more work with that to show you how you can use your formulas. So I do have to ungroup to do this. So I'm going to ungroup my sheets first. And again, I want to use the names in my formulas. So I'll show you a shortcut for this in a second, but you can't use group sheets with it. So you do have to ungroup them first. So I'm going to go to sheet 1 still. And I'm going to select the range of C5 through C, let's see, 43 here. So maybe I would like my names to be valid in this particular column, right? I'd like to see those cell references instead used as the name, total sales or percent or whatever we were doing there. So what you're going to do is you go up to your formulas tab here still, and you're going to click define name. And then what you could do is you click apply names. So it's going to go ahead and apply the names here. So I would like the total sales name to be applied. You can select more than one if you want to have them all applied. I'm just going to have one of them applied. And you do want to click off ignore relative and absolute value symbols. Remember, those absolute value symbols are those $ symbols. So we do want to ignore that stuff. We would like the name applied anytime cell B7 is used, for instance, right on that sheet. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that. And then I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And you'll see here that when I click now on cell C5, instead of being divided by B7, it says it's divided by the total sales. And same thing here. Instead of being divided by B7, it says total sales. So that name goes into my formula instead. And again, it's referenced here as well. Any place that B7 occurs on this particular sheet, because remember, this sheet, each of those B7s were named total sales, it will change over. So we do see those formulas there as well. Okay, so wherever they are relevant. So that's a nice little change here. Okay, let's say you would like to see, you want to do this for all of your sheets and you'd like to have a shortcut. All right, so there is a way to do it, although you have to do it a little bit differently. So I'm going to regroup sheets 2 through 8. instead, all right, because sheet 1 is already done. So I'm going to regroup sheets 2 through 8. And then I'm going to go ahead and again select that same column, so C5 through C43. Okay. And then to do it all at once, we're going to have to go to the Home tab and then the Find feature. So that little magnifying glass here, the Find and Replace, and we're going to do Replace. So anytime that we see cell B7, oops, B7, we'd like to replace that with the name total sales. So this is a different way to do it, where you're using the replace feature instead of kind of like the naming feature here. But that's another way that you can do it. All right, we're going to replace all in this case. And you can see that they made 161 changes here. So you can see that now it does say total sales there. Again, where it's relevant. There it is again. And if I look at the different sheets, I do see that it does change it for all sheets. So again, it's just a different way. There's another one for us to replace some of those cell references with names. Again, which is really more helpful if you're trying to present your information or share it with somebody who may have trouble following along with all the cell references. So one, again, we can rename our cells and use formula features that way, or as another way too is you can use that find and replace feature as well if you need to do multiple worksheets at the same time.